Hello.
Hi there, how you doing?
Good. Peak hour for morning time meetings in Europe. It's good. So I haven't looked at much since last time. I don't think I've looked at anything since last time. However, I did manage to sell and buy a new car. And it's a British car, so I'm buying a Mini. Well, rather, my wife's buying a Mini. She chose a Mini, so which is good. So that was taking a bit of time and other things. But yeah. So what have we got next? It was the home stretch. It felt like.
Yeah, so what we need to do next is just work through the rest of these timeline charts, and then we need to have a think about what we want the conclusions to be for this year.
And then how to sort of promote it. What posts and content to do and share, and I guess in that case we probably could lean on some professional outside help for marketing and how to get things at the right time in the right places. We can even get things placed in air quotes press, still say press, things like that. Might be worthwhile considering if we have those ways to get the word out there, and that'll bring other people along as well.
Yeah.
I should. I'll make a note for next week to follow up with the fellow from Netflix that was doing the Metaflow thing, because he was very interested in it and he was going to have a look at it. And I think it'd be great to have sort of, if we are going to sort of push this out, to have some sort of names out there. So I think that's something we can look at. So yeah.
Yeah, and obviously we need to keep promoting those t-shirts as well.
Yeah, these you can see my. Yes, I wore it Thursday last week as well, and chatted to the same people this week, and they're like, "Have you changed your shirt?" I have changed my shirt. I've got a few of these, and
it's such a good shirt.
It is. It fits so well. It's so comfy. So, and I've got Cloudbeast branded ones, but they're very light colored, and they're always stained with something, and it just looks so like it's just.
Right, so let's take a look at what these actually are. I think we've got to this governance processes one. So that starts there.
Sorry, how many rows down is this in the solutions? Governance processes. Yeah, I can just search for it.
So this is quite a complex requirement. And, I expect to see parts of this being evolved over time. So I would guess it's probably year 3 before we're done with development activities on most of the bits in here. So I think we're probably sort of 3 years of development and then into continuous improvement.
Yeah, I think where people are at right now, certainly sort of where I am, is you train something and then you use it for a while, and you retrain it and you use it for a while. I feel like I'm a long way from being mature enough to have this kind of. So yeah, it feels like, and all the tools sort of exist, there's tools that probably could do this to exist, but it's it's partly they have to exist and partly people have to use them, and then the knowledge disseminates. So yeah, it does feel like it's a while away.
Yeah, and some of the tools I think will be quite complex. So you know, I expect to see, you know, the low-hanging fruit sorted fairly quickly, but then, you know, an evolutionary period where we start to develop probably some machine learning solutions to some of the governance problems. So the next one is management of shared dependencies between training and operational phases. So this is about keeping things in sync between what you're doing in the training side of your scripts and what you're doing in deployment. Now, it's definitely a technical challenge.
It feels like the technology probably exists for that. Is there any?
Yeah, I think this is just continuous improvement. So so we should probably just mark this one as all grey, and then just keep pushing to make sure that those features are available in platforms. So abstraction layer for models. This is where we need some sort of intermediate format between the training stage that's building a model and then the execution phase that's actually running the model.
Is this analogous to something like an application binary interface, an ABI, or a VM image, or like is that the analogy here? Like a machine readable binary format that's standard.
This is kind of like JSON as opposed to serialization.
Right.
So, you know, an example of this that exists already is Onyx.
Yes. I mean, it feels like that's a while away, because even for things like, even if I think of, you know, the formats for virtual machines, even that took a while. And even now there's multiple ones. Like there might not be one of these, but
so
like it feels like people wouldn't really want to settle down on this yet, would they? Like it needs a few more years of the use cases emerging before people will accept, okay, this is the.
So as an example, with MLOps in Jenkins X, we rely on Onyx for most of the examples. And so it's working today for a limited subset of machine learning types, but we're constrained by what Onyx supports as to how easy it is to bring on more types of machine learning techniques. And Onyx, whilst it's maturing fairly rapidly, it probably needs more support, and so I would say there's probably at least a couple of years of development going on here.
Development underway, and then some qualification.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll go straight into continuous improvement on this, because really we're already in continuous improvement to a certain stage, but to have a full capability that this implies, I think there's a couple of years of development and then into continuous integration.
Yep, makes sense. Just taking note. Longevity of ML assets, that seems very Is that actually a separate row? Yeah, that seems very related to that, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
it would. So that's at least as long as the abstraction layer. Because would you say that you can't have that without an abstraction layer?
I think the abstraction layer will make it easier to manage things longer term. The challenge right now is that you can build assets that you can try and maintain, but because you're serializing models, then those are subject to any breaking changes in the environment that happens after you release the model.
Yeah, the Java analogy is interesting. It's like the jar standard, put things in a zip file in a certain way, came along, but then there's the content of the class files that is specific to some aspects of architecture or the version of the JVM. And then maybe you've got things like, you've got Nexus and Artifactory for artifacts like that. That was part of the maturity there. And things like Maven Central existed so that you can depend on a artifact instead of depending on its source. Like, to me, that feels like ML, to get there, it needs to, all of that infrastructure sort of needs to be built out and proven.
Yeah, and to an extent, it's a bit more like long-running processes in a workflow environment where what you're doing is kicking off a process and then it goes on hold for 6 months while somebody does something, and then you come back to it and you need to reinstantiate that.
Yeah, and it has to be the same version of it, because it's usually those, if it's an insurance policy or something, it's usually grandfathered in or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the same as the one above, really. And then managing and tracking trade-offs. Now, this is a very broad piece that's really extending the boundaries of what the tooling is capable of doing. So I think this is a full-on sort of needing to do some research first, and then.
Yeah, I can sort of relate to this one. It's not a easy. Like I was training models to estimate the size of things, with some success, and then I thought, those models can be per account, if you like, per organization, but they're flexible enough to be multi-organization. So instead of having N models for N organizations, I could have one model. But that would mean I'm taking data from unrelated organizations, mixing it together and training the model. And that sort of felt like a weird thing to do. Probably for this reason, it's like if it had to be explainable from the source data, then it's like, oh, you've got data from XYZ and data from ABC, they come together. None of the remnants of that remain in the model, but yeah. In some ways, I don't know if tooling could solve that for me. Really.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot that would need to be done in that area. So I think there's at least one black there in terms of research needed, and then probably 3 years of development effort to really get a good set of capabilities in that area.
Yeah, and it's maturity as well, of people getting used to the idea of like that scenario I described, where for efficiency, you might train a model on multiple customers' data, and that trained model is used for a third customer or one of the other two. That would, if you explain that to people now, it would probably upset them. But maybe in, as the tools mature and as time passes and people get more exposed to it, and development goes underway, then it becomes more of an area of continuous improvement. So yeah, I think I'm agreeing with that. Like
Okay.
that seems, I think for the meantime, people will tend to be very conservative, or there'll be knee-jerk reaction and things like that.
Yeah. So the escalation of data categories one
Harry,
is,
can I ask you a question? For the managing and tracking trade-offs, you've mentioned in the past that for the work that you're doing, you are using sort of parallel training, and that there's a bit of a, you use the phrase evolutionary process for this, in that you must have some benchmarks that you're expecting these different variations to be meeting, and you will only take forward the ones that are meeting certain expectations. And then, am I understanding correctly how you've described? Yeah. So this is actually fitting very nicely in that within what you're doing. Am I understanding this correct?
so that's the aspiration, is to have tooling that would enable that easily. So rather than having to write bespoke systems to be able to do that, to be able to have that capability intrinsic in the tooling is what this one's about.
So that's fantastic. Would you be willing or interested to write a case study in terms of what you're doing in this area?
Potentially, we'd have to look at it.
Okay.
So yeah, the escalation of data categories, I think this is, at this stage, is kind of a prediction. So this is, we expect over the next few years that this problem is going to arise, and when it arises, we're going to have to put in place solutions to mitigate the risks associated. So my gut feel for this is it's probably black for 3 years while we wait to see what happens in the compliance space, and then after that you can then start to look at developing solutions. So it's probably, this one doesn't arrive on the time horizon of this roadmap, so it's probably 3 years of black, 2 years of blue, and then we don't actually know whether it will be available at that point, or if we'll still be working on it.
So I think this needing to respond to regulation and basically societal norms on how data should be handled is kind of the path that the industry needs to take. But I have read, and I do not have any real substantial knowledge in this area, but I was reading about distributed ledger technology and how that could be used to both provide some data protection as well as traceability. And I was wondering if you have any more knowledge or context you want to add to that, like if you've looked into it at all.
I think the trouble with distributed ledger allows you to retain control over the information, and to audit when it's being used, but it doesn't mitigate.
Doesn't really hide it, does it? Like the idea
No,
is that it's on the public record.
Yeah. So you've still got the problem that in order to train the models, you're going to have to aggregate that data, and then in order to be able to then provide the explainability, you're then somehow going to have to be able to link back to factors that can potentially reveal privacy related information, for example. And a lot of the risk here is that you're just forcing people to hold more data in the first place. So, if you need to check for, say, ethnic bias, then to be able to validate that, you've actually got to have the information about everybody's ethnicity. So that means that you're forcing people to then hand over that information in order to be compliant with a law that was designed to protect them, and therefore you're just making the information more likely to be leaked or misused rather than less likely. Yeah, it's messy at the moment, and I think we're going to have to look at how we.
Did we skip past, or did you already do managing and tracking trade-offs?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I just missed that somehow. Yep, sorry.
So next one then is intrinsic protection of models. So this is a fundamental security concern.
Security and IP, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, given that models could contain IP, then yeah, it's the same as a binary, which is interesting when you've got things like the GPL and ASL and different licenses that are well tested and battle hardened. How does that apply to models that are doing the job of handwritten code, but they're trained on sets of data? Like those licenses aren't designed for that. I just thought that's an interesting open source side angle. Who owns the because the interesting things in the future may well be the data and the models, which a lot of IP stuff is not really configured for.
Yeah, I think we're a long way away on this one, because you've got some fundamental challenges like Python. So solving this is going to need not just the technology, but also a big shift in behavior.
In lieu of Python, what are the other better options?
Well, the challenge with Python is the fact that it's a scripting language, and therefore it always has an interpreter available wherever there's a runtime. So it means that wherever you've got a Python environment, you've got the ability to inject source code that you can execute. So if you were to use a compiled language, then you can deploy into an environment where there's no compiler, but there is a runtime. And so you can prevent people from injecting ad hoc scripts to be able to execute attacks.
That feels a long way away. Like there's so much in Python. Like even things like SciPy allow me to do things I wouldn't know how to do with other tools. Like it seems like it's a long time before that. There's just such a breadth of valuable things there that build on each other.
I would probably say at least 4 years of development work here before we start to get to any sort of maturity.
Yeah. And maybe they'll end up being sort of Python compilers or obfuscators or some other trick like that. I don't know.
So emergency cutout.
Emergency cutout.
I think we've got the technology to do this.
Yeah.
So really, it's just improving the tooling so we make it easier to use.
It's like probably continuous improvement, although I don't know if anyone really thinks about this to do it. Maybe they do. Maybe there are systems that are chatbots or interact with humans in some way that could be abusive. I'm sure they have. But I'd hope they'd have safeguards in place.
Yeah.
I was playing with GPT-2. So GPT-3 is the one that's open only as a service that I've tried to get access to. But GPT-2, I've been trying and out just to see how it works. And it's they do have big warnings that you shouldn't put this directly in front of people that's not in a research context, because it could do anything. And I haven't had it say anything that bad yet, but you know, it wouldn't surprise me. Interestingly, my son uses it to generate, he's been playing around with it to generate historical fan fiction. He gives it a whole scenario from some of his history books, types it all in, and then we let it crunch for a while, and it comes out with a story involving something, and he's fascinated how it gets geographical details right and stuff. But yeah, but yeah, it certainly wouldn't have an emergency cutout, because otherwise, you know, if it was about to say something bad, then it would just crash. But I think the technology exists for this, but it's not, maybe not used, but maybe that's just an area of continuous improvement, I'd say.
Yeah. And then the last one is the online learning stuff, which, you know, we've already discussed is, you know, outside of the current vision for CICD. So
that stays to be determined.
Yeah, it's a, well, I think that probably needs to stay as research needed.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we'll just this year leave that one as all black,
mm-hmm.
And then revisit it next year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all of those. So I'll update that table
Mm-hmm.
and circulate for review. So the last key piece really in the roadmap is that we have a section which is our conclusions and recommendations. So we need to work out what we want to say as a summary of where the roadmap is and what the state of play is, and
yeah, what sort of like how much detail is that? Is it just a paragraph summary? Is it a is it really just a pointer to the sections above, like the conclusions would be for the challenges, look at the requirements and then the potential solutions, and if it's you know, if it's in a continuous improvement state, then we should continue doing that, or focus research in the black areas. Like what are we, like, who's going to be reading that sort of section? Would they be people that skip ahead to it and they want to read a summary of it?
I think in general it would be the place where you drew attention to particular things that needed more work, or areas that we anticipate that would be more challenging. I think perhaps in the first year, maybe it's just a place to discuss the overall maturity of the practice and to encourage work on specific areas of the roadmap. So it's perhaps an enjoinder to people to pick something and see how they can add that into their product.
Well, maybe I'll put a note to have a starter pull request. Where I can start my interpretation of where things are at, and then we can maybe iterate on that.
I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Just start writing it. For the references section, do we really need that? Like, there's various links in our ongoing Google Doc notes that things we've referenced to, and so on. Is it worthwhile putting them in there, or do you have any specific prior work that you want to link to there, or is that the section we can just leave out?
My feeling there is that anything that we link there in the roadmap, we're implicitly supporting and condoning.
Which is risky.
So typically you would restrict that to, you know, research papers and supporting information. Right. So I don't think we've really got any examples of that we need to draw attention to this year. So we can probably drop that section for this year.
Yeah. Yep, I think so. There might be the odd paper mentioned here and there, but I don't recall anything. I think there was a few academic papers I think I mentioned at some point, but they were just more part of our general discussion. I don't think they are relevant to the I don't think they are relevant to the roadmap. So yeah, we can drop that. So
yeah, I mean, that would be a place, for example, where in the future, where we have explicit examples of compliance regulation that are seen to be causing problems, then we would reference the legislation in there.
Mm-hmm. Or if there were specific solutions that were for certain things that we wanted to, I suppose they could link from the solution table above. But yeah, like that might read as a explicit endorsement when we don't really want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the finalizing of it. So we should have it done by next time.
Yeah, that would be good. It's a good time of year to get these sort of closed off, and then you can then spend a bit of time promoting it, and then we start to think about how we update it for next year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think promoting it with some, a few different blog posts talking through specific scenarios. I know we've had really good discussions over the months about certain things that were relevant to certain challenges or problems caused. So I think blogs and articles that talk to that could be quite interesting, that then link back to the roadmap as a way to publicize it as well.
Yeah.
And I'll see if I can follow up with Netflix and anyone else, any sort of other sort of names we can get on it. Would be interesting. So, but yeah, we've certainly got, at CloudBees at least, we've got access to sort of some marketing firepower that they can get it in front of certain people and, have a better chance of getting enough eyeballs on it. And I'm sure a lot of people would be interested if they hear about it. I think that's the trick, is getting people to hear about it. Because it's a big area of discussion, all of these challenges, like even with non-developers, non-technical people are curious about it. And yeah. Oh, I did see a sad and funny video today. I think I saw it on TikTok of it was this cleaner watching a robot clean, it was a shopping mall, supermarket floor or whatever, and there was one of those cleaning robots going around. And he's there with his mop and he just has the saddest expression on his face. And it's like it's like he's seeing his just career being, automated away. I just thought that was interesting. It was both funny and horrifying at the same time, but it is what it is. All right. Well, you could probably have an early mark this week. Anything else you wanted to bring up, Cara?
Just a small joke. I think my parents have one of those, and it's probably going to be more like a dishwasher. Like, hopefully, it won't unemploy masses of people.
No, I do have I got a we had Father's Day on the weekend, and for Father's Day I got a robot vacuum cleaner, which is awesome. So I love it. And I've never had floors so clean. So I just move it around the house at different times of day, and it's great. But yeah, it's just saving me work.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be that. But what I was going to say is that for the conclusion and any outward messaging we do, we should really always, and I'm sure we will, but always put to the fore and emphasize the overall goals in a really positive way. And we have this at the top of the roadmap, but I think reiterating it is always positive. So there's the specific goals or initiatives, but the overall arching, what we're trying to achieve and the good that we're trying to do in a collaborative way within the foundation, I think is really important.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's good to chat again, as always, and yeah, chat again in 2 weeks, and yeah, hopefully then start planning some content now to promote to things, and there may even be some interesting projects out there that solve some of these problems we can work with to promote, and companies like Netflix and stuff. So yeah, I'm hoping to see that Netflix is they had sort of their internal version of this, so it'll be good to compare notes. So if I get that, I'll bring that up next week. So. All right. Well, till next time, have a good Thursday.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Scary thought, because I failed in my